Ever wondered which Spider-Man game lets you live out your childhood comic fantasies without feeling like you're playing through a bad cosplay convention? Fear not. We're web-slinging through 3 different takes on everyone's favorite arachnid-themed hero to find out which one deserves a spot in the Daily Bugle headlines and which ones belong in J. Jonah Jameson's trash can.
Your job ends by a thread. If I paid you, I'd cut your salary in half.
From perfectly timed quips to physics-defying acrobatics, we're examining how these games translate from page to PlayStation. The psychological need for comic accuracy in video games can be explained through terror management theory and social identity theory. When games authentically recreate comic book elements from noir detective atmosphere to futuristic cityscapes, they help validate fans' deep emotional investment in these stories. This ties into our fundamental need for cultural worldview validation. The games become more than just entertainment. They are validations of the stories and characters that have shaped our identities as fans. When a game nails those individual universe tones and character personalities, it reinforces our connection to these meaningful narratives. A perfect comic adaptation game needs to nail these core elements. The game must make you feel like you're controlling the actual comic character, with powers and abilities that match their comic counterparts. Combat and movement mechanics need to be fluid and impactful, creating that perfect blend of power and control that makes you forget you're playing a game. The story needs to respect established lore while being bold enough to tell its own compelling narrative. Characters should maintain their core identities and relationships, with dialogue that feels lifted straight from the best comic runs. The game world must be packed with authentic references and Easter eggs that reward comic knowledge. From loading screens featuring iconic comic covers to environments that perfectly capture the artistic style of legendary artists, every detail should feel like a carefully crafted love letter to the source material. Let me know in the comments, what was the first Spider-Man game you ever played? I bet some of you remember Spider-Man vs. the Kingpin on the Sega Genesis. Let's see how these Spider-Man titles stack up, starting with one that tried to do everything at once, and might have bitten off more than it could chew. Spider-Man Shattered Dimensions launched on September 7th, 2010, for PlayStation 3, Xbox 360, Nintendo Wii, and Nintendo DS. In theaters that summer, we were all watching Inception, trying to figure out if that top was still spinning. While Christopher Nolan was bending our minds with dream layers, Beanox decided to throw us into 4 different Spider-Man dimensions at once. When it comes to comic accuracy, Shattered Dimensions takes some creative liberties that actually work in its favor. The game brings together 4 distinct Spider-Man universes: Amazing, Noir, 2099, and Ultimate, weaving them into an original story about Mysterio shattering the Tablet of Order and Chaos. While this storyline isn't directly pulled from any specific comic arc, it brilliantly showcases the multiverse concept that Marvel Comics had been exploring for years. The Amazing Universe stays closest to classic Spider-Man comics, featuring the traditional red and blue suit we all know. Noir Spider-Man draws heavily from the Marvel Noir series, capturing that gritty 1930s detective vibe perfectly. Spider-Man 2099 takes Miguel O'Hara straight from the pages of his comic run, and Ultimate Spider-Man brings that younger, more aggressive version of Peter Parker to life. Each dimension's narrative feels authentic to its comic book source material, even though the overarching plot is original. Neil Patrick Harris absolutely nails the classic wisecracking Amazing Spider-Man, bringing that perfect balance of humor and heroism we expect. Christopher Daniel Barnes returns as Noir Spider-Man, delivering a gritty, hard-boiled detective vibe that fits perfectly with that universe's 1930s setting. Dan Gilvezan as Spider-Man 2099 brings Miguel O'Hara to life with all the futuristic attitude and swagger you'd want, while Josh Keaton captures Ultimate Spider-Man's younger, more energetic personality perfectly. Even the villains get their time to shine. Mysterio is appropriately theatrical, Hobgoblin maintains his medieval flair, and each dimension's version of the characters keeps their unique traits intact. The character models deserve special praise. Each Spider-Man suit has been meticulously recreated with all the subtle details comic fans would expect. From the metallic sheen of 2099's suit to the rough, worn texture of Noir's leather costume, these aren't just palette swaps, they're loving tributes to their comic counterparts. The writers for Shattered Dimensions clearly did their homework. Every interaction between characters feels natural and purposeful, Even the smaller dialogue moments land perfectly. Those little comments Spider-Man makes while swinging through the city or during combat show just how well the writers understood these characters. It's not just about making jokes, it's about capturing the essence of what makes each Spider-Man unique, while keeping them all distinctly Spider-Man at their core. Another developer would take a radically different approach, stripping away the complexity to focus on capturing the pure essence of the source material. Ultimate Spider-Man swung onto PlayStation 2 in September 2005. YouTube had just launched that year, and everyone was watching Star Wars Episode 3: Revenge of the Sith in theaters. Ultimate Spider-Man stays incredibly faithful to its source material, working directly with comic writer Brian Michael Bendis to craft an authentic continuation of the Ultimate Universe storyline. The game picks up right after the Venom saga in Ultimate Spider-Man number 38, expanding on Peter and Eddie's complicated relationship in ways the comics never got to explore. The narrative weaves seamlessly between Peter Parker and Venom sequences, giving us that same dual-perspective storytelling that made the Ultimate comics so groundbreaking. And even the way certain scenes mirror specific comic panels, it all comes together to create something that truly honors its source material while standing strong as its own unique chapter in the Ultimate Spider-Man saga. The voice acting brings all the snark and wit straight from the comics. The animation team really outdid themselves. Every web swing and acrobatic move flows with that same fluid energy Bagley was famous for in his run. The environmental design deserves special praise too. New York City feels ripped straight from the comics, with that slightly stylized architecture and those bold color choices that define the Ultimate Universe. Ultimate Spider-Man's power system perfectly captures that raw energy from the comics. Web swinging feels incredible. You're zipping between buildings with this perfect sense of momentum that makes every transit through the city exciting. The combat system brings those acrobatic moves straight from the page, letting you bounce between enemies with devastating combos that flow seamlessly into web attacks. Ultimate Spider-Man is packed with incredible comic book references that'll make any fan smile. The game turns New York into a treasure hunt of Ultimate Universe callbacks. The Daily Bugle building features actual headlines from the comic series scrolling across its news ticker. The developers went above and beyond with the collectibles. Each one connects to a specific Ultimate Spider-Man comic issue, whether it's finding Peter's original homemade web shooters or stumbling across Eddie Brock's old journalism notes. Even the loading screens feature art directly inspired by Mark Bagley's most memorable covers. The evolution of comic adaptation was clearly taking shape, but the biggest leap forward was still to come. As gaming technology advanced and developers learned from past successes and failures, a new project would redefine what's possible in bringing comics to life. Marvel's Spider-Man swung onto PlayStation 4 exclusively in September 2018, right when everyone was getting caught up in the Battle Royale craze with Fortnite Season 5. While gamers were building forts and doing the floss dance, Insomniac Games was busy crafting what would become the new gold standard for superhero games. Marvel's Spider-Man creates its own compelling narrative while respectfully drawing from decades of comic history. The game takes the bold approach of showing us an experienced Peter Parker, 8 years into his career as Spider-Man. This allows the story to skip the well-worn origin tale and dive straight into fresh territory. While not directly adapting any specific comic storyline, it weaves together familiar elements in exciting new ways. The game's portrayal of Otto Octavius's descent into villainy draws clear inspiration from comics like Spider-Man No More and Spider-Man Behind the Mask, presenting it through an intimate mentor-mentee relationship that adds fresh emotional weight. Norman Osborn's role as mayor provides a fascinating twist on the classic Green Goblin dynamic, showing him as a public figure whose choices impact the city even before any supervillain transformation. This builds on elements from storylines like Ultimate Spider-Man while establishing its own unique take on the character. The attention to detail in Spider-Man's suit textures is incredible. You can see individual fabric patterns. Every web swing and combat move flows with the same dynamic energy you'd expect from a Steve Ditko or John Romita Sr. splash page. Peter's quips during combat nail that signature Spider-Man humor we've loved for decades. Smart, witty, and always perfectly timed. Combat evolves the Batman Arkham formula into something uniquely Spider-Man. The collectible backpacks scattered throughout the city each contain meaningful artifacts from Peter's past. Finding his original spider bite infected blood sample or his rejected Bugle photo submissions adds depth to this version of Spider-Man while honoring the source material. Even the newspaper headlines and street names reference specific comic storylines and creators. And you need to watch this video, Astrobot's Bold Victory, how it stole the win at the 2024 Game Awards. And remember, seek to learn, not judge.